Chuck Schumer just worked to push through the Trump administration's continuing resolution. So we were facing a possible government shutdown in the United States, and there was a threat that Chuck Schumer analyzed was too severe to allow a shutdown to happen. That he believed that if a shutdown was to occur, that Trump would take over the institutions of power, furlough employees with the intention of never bringing them back, and further his cutting agenda. But in this continuing resolution, there's also a bunch of cuts. Cuts to the IRS, cuts to the EPA, cuts to housing. It gives the president more authority on how he can allocate funds that are approved by Congress. Takes a pot shot at the VA. This is not a continuing resolution that is just, we're going to have more of what we had before, because there are cuts. As well as the fact that, you know, putting aside what's in this continuing resolution, what's in the continuing resolution isn't only what the Trump administration is doing. They are making cuts to budgets. They are making staffing cuts. They are making policy cuts without the advice of Congress whatsoever, without their congressional power being taken into account. Article 1, the power of the purse of Congress. If Congress allocates funds for the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, or for national parks, or for USAID, or for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or for any institution, that's what that fund was allocated for. And if they say that it was allocated for this, that's what it has to be spent on. You cannot take that money and spend it somewhere else, and you certainly cannot just slash that money because you don't like the institution. The way this is supposed to work is that the American people are supposed to get a say. Now, the Trump team would argue that they elected Trump. That was them having their say. When they elected Trump, they elected him to cut the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They elected him to attack Greenland. They elected him to annex Canada. They elected him to make all these cuts to U.S. aid, fire all these federal workers, cuts to the IRS. No, they didn't. They largely voted on the economy and against the incumbency. That's what the polling indicates. It's clear as day. I don't think as many people voted for the killing of U.S. aid, no matter how many X threads you want to post out there about its soft coups or whatever. They were not inspired about that. That's not what they voted for. They did not vote for Donald Trump to forget the basics of Schoolhouse Rock when it comes to who has the power of the purse when they voted for the president. They voted for a president. They didn't vote for a king. They didn't vote for a queen or even a boy prince. They voted for a president of the United States who's supposed to follow the law, even if they voted for him knowing that he doesn't follow the law. I didn't say our country exactly makes sense, but it is our country. And so Donald Trump pushes through this continuing resolution, and one tactic that a lot of Democrats wanted to see the Senate do, because in the House, Democrats were united. Everybody voted against the continuing resolution, but like a handful of Democrats. But it still went through, and now it was in the Senate. Now to get to the Senate floor for a vote, it has to be approved by 60 senators before it can go through the second vote on the floor of the Senate to be approved. Now, Democrats did not get any say in how this legislation was crafted. We did not get any say. We did not get any policy implementation. We did not tell them do this, do that. The Republicans basically made the entire CR themselves, made the cuts that they made. We wouldn't have approved the cuts if we were probably talking about that, if we were there, because it's a continuing resolution. Democrats got no say. And so that means the unconstitutional attack on the power of the purse would continue. That means these cuts would be made. And that means that Elon Musk would continue to run havoc in our government. And so what AOC wanted, what Nancy Pelosi wanted, what the vast majority of Democrats, both the activist base and I think the majority of the party wanted, was for Chuck Schumer to say, we are not going to move this to the House floor unless you stop all of the unconstitutional nonsense on the floor. I understand Chuck Schumer's argument that a government shutdown would give the president broad discretion as the executive to choose what is essential and non-essential services, which would almost certainly mean at least more furloughs, more people being laid off. But that does not mean that we have to sit idly by as he continues to gut the Constitution as is and set that standard, not only for Republican presidents, but God forbid a Democrat president follows in his shoes. And we make that a bipartisan standard. It's something that has to be confronted. If the Republicans will not do their job as working as a legislative check on power of the president, then it is the Democrats' job to make him do their job. It feels like, because one of Chuck Schumer's arguments, and I think one of his strongest arguments, was that if the government shuts down in a few weeks, the courts could run out of money. And then the legislative check of the legislature is not only kneecapped, but now the courts don't have money. And then what's left? The chief executive, the presidency. And I think this is one of the most compelling arguments, but I want to put forward that the polling on this has already been done. The vast majority of Americans, if there was a shutdown right now, would blame the Republican Party. They would blame the Republican Party. The vast majority of Americans. The polling has already been done on this, and it was something like a margin of like 45 to 25, a margin of 55 to 23. Like the margins were substantial. We're talking 2-to-1 numbers. And you want to know why? Because the Republicans control the presidency, the Republicans control the legislature, and the Republicans, for all intents and purposes, from a activist agenda standpoint, they control a decent portion of the Supreme Court. At least had a lot of influence over it. There's a reason Roe versus Wade was overturned. And so if the government shuts down because Democrats stand up and say, hey guys, can we just not burn the Constitution? Lincoln's party. I don't think that would necessarily be so bad for us. I think even the pathetic honeymoon period that Trump has experienced, which has him like 50-50 with the American voters, Biden was at 67% at a similar time in his presidency right now. I think you shorten that honeymoon period. I think you kneecap that honeymoon period. I think what you do is you put the blame at the feet of Trump, because if he's not going to follow the Constitution, you need to check it. I think that there is a benefit to making sure the courts stay funded right now and taking away that avenue. And Trump probably, due to the fact that he's a scrapper, would have probably just tried to progress anyway and see how far he could get. But I think he would have gotten up to his neck in shit. I think he would have gotten up to his neck in shit. He would have gotten out of his depth. And then these crises would be on him. Would that be worse for the country? Yes, in the immediate term. But I think the violation of the Constitution in the long term is something that will do generational trauma. And so it's something we need to be ferocious in standing up against. So I'm more sympathetic to Chuck Schumer's arguments than, say, probably most of the people that are in his replies right now, which you just gave approval to what Musk and Trump are currently doing. Shut up. Shut the entire fuck up. Take your old, tired, cowardly ass back to Brooklyn and sit in silence. I still think it was the wrong move. And I'm not alone in this conviction. I know Nancy Pelosi believes it was the wrong move, and while she did not say Chuck by name, at the end of the day, it was pretty clear who she was talking about, and it was Chuck Schumer. Now, I do want to make sure that he gets a moment to speak, because, you know, I've given my take, and want to make sure he gets his, even though I think I expressed his point clearly. Here is Chuck Schumer explaining his vote, which he recorded in vlogger fashion to get to the people, I assume.
While voting for this CR is bad, it's a whole lot worse to vote to shut down the government. Elon Musk, Doge, and Donald Trump will use the power to shut down the government to fire hundreds of thousands, if not millions of workers, shut down whole departments, and shrink the government for tax cuts for billionaires. It will be devastating, something like we have never seen before. One of the worst things? Courts could run out of money in a few weeks. One of the few refuges we've had to stop the autocratic, vicious proposals of Trump and Musk and Doge have been the courts. And so this shutdown, the idea of a shutdown, is atrocious across the board. We have to stop it. Shutting down the government will be terrible. They could stay in shutdown for weeks, months, even years. And one of the Republican senators just told some of our senators, if you go in shutdown, it's going to be months before we open up the government. And we have no way to stop them. There's no exit ramp. It'll be totally up to them when to open up the government. Shutdowns with autocrats, vicious people, nasty people like Musk and Trump and Doge in charge, is disaster for us.
Look, I understand the argument, and I think the threat of the government will be shut down for months. And it is true that since they hold the majorities, they would hold broad discretion when it comes to the reopening of the government. The question would be, do you believe that they would take the hit now and be willing to take the hit now under the impression that they could recover before the midterms? Or would they get in the shit, panic, and then try to paddle their way out and say, fine, we'll ask Congress next time when Elon makes a cut? I think he should have at least attempted to call their bluff. Do you think Andy Bashir is electable enough to become president? It depends who he's running against, and it depends on what his campaign message is. But I do believe that what Tim Walz is doing by going to the different, town halls in Iowa, in Republican districts, I do think this is smart. And I think, in these moments where, the Constitution is being put under siege, where the courts really is our last bastion and the protection of many fundamental American freedoms, going on the offense, I think, is important. No matter the honeymoon, no matter what Hakeem Jeffries might think, or what James Carville might say about playing dead. I think now is the time to get active and push forward and treat it like campaign season never ended. And I think Tim Walz is one of the few people treating it like that. One of the top, leadership or top well-known Democrats treating it like that, and I appreciate it. And the speech he gave in this Republican district where a Republican refused to hold a town hall, where he tried to bring the message of the Democratic agenda to them, I thought he did a very good job. And I wanted to play some of it for you guys because I think this is Tim Walz at his best. And it makes me question how the campaign could have maybe been different if Tim was at the top of the ticket and we saw more of this.
Wow. Hello, neighbors. So good to see you. Have a seat. Have a seat. Have a seat in this beautiful space. My God. Thank you. Thank you to Roosevelt, the principals, the staff that works here, the students for in this beautiful space. I was mentioning, this reminds me of a very historic high school in Minnesota. Looks almost like this up in Hibbing, that the world got to see because that's where Bob Dylan went to high school. So that's right. And I saw this was Cloris Leachman's stage that we're on. So amazing. Iowa, you've got the best party chair, and just quite honest.
Danabo is in chat saying, my editor, that he disagrees with me on Schumer, that Schumer did nothing wrong. Look, it would not be Democrats shutting down the government. In order to get it to the floor, you need 60 votes. If the president of the United States is violating the Constitution when it comes to the legislator is supposed to check him. If the checks and balance does not work, if the check does not check, we're surrendering the legislature and betting entirely on the courts under this model and allowing them to completely just choose which government institutions, with or without a vote, get or don't get funded.
Honestly, the best neighbor you could find and read.
That's what the headline would be. Danabo, they've already done the polling on this. The majority of Americans would blame the Republicans if a shutdown was to occur. They control the legislature. They control the presidency. They control all the checks. They have the power. The American people know they have the power. If the Democrats say, do your job, do the basics of your job, and we'll bring this continuing resolution to the House floor, and then the media comes to them, asks them, why are you doing this? Just do your job. Just make sure that, the government workers that were funded and that we voted on this stuff for them to get this legislation, that they continue to be funded. Because if we vote for a CR that has funding for institutions that don't exist anymore, what's even the point of voting for a CR? I'm sympathetic to his points, but I still think it was not the move to make.
So thank you. Incredible. All right, it's 80 degrees in March.
Why is it
Friday at the
like
end of the workday, and here you sit.
Here we go.
It speaks volumes to what this country and this state means to folks in Iowa, because this is what's required of us in the democracy. You came here, as I always say, when you gather like this, there's other things you could be doing. You come here because you're like, well, damn it, I got to go there because they're not doing their damn job, so I'm going to go do it. That's what you do. But it's a labor of love. It's a labor of love because you love this country. And also said you understand a town hall is not a performative event. It's an expression of the people's right to petition their government. It's also about free speech, to be able to stand up and speak of what you're doing. Now, there's a lot of folks say, I love freedom. I love freedom. I love freedom. Well, we do too. But I would argue the folks in this room, when we say we love freedom, that means freedom for everybody. It means freedom for everybody. You don't get to slice off some people and they don't count. Because if you do slice off people from that I love freedom, you don't really love freedom. What you love is privilege. And that's a different thing. That's a different thing. And so look, I heard Rita talking about the State House, by the way. My God, last year I got a chance to tour the Iowa State Capitol and that law library that's up there. Oh my God, it's beautiful. But the part that shook me the most is I got to see the governor's office. It's huge. It's way too big for the small ideas that are coming out of it. Way too big. Lord.
It's crazy to think that if the person who represented this area did hold his town hall, the entire vibe in the room would be totally different. It'd probably be half the size, and it would be toxic. There's a reason why he didn't do a town hall and Tim Walz did. It's because of the momentum of what's going on in the news in the country, what the administration's doing, the type of feedback they're going to get. He can just go after all of those issues as fiercely as he wants to, because now he's the opposition. And it's really easy to just like open fire, because what are they going to hold him to account to? He's the governor from another state. This is like easy work for Walz. This is just smart. Who is anybody? What are they going to come to complain to Tim Walz about? Maybe not prioritizing something during his campaign? This is good. This is smart. And him using this as a platform to support the Democrats in these districts that could be challenging the Republicans down the road. I think this is what you would call leadership in the chaos. Tim Walz taking this move to do this.
Now look, if we'd have won an election last fall, we wouldn't be in this mess.
The only other person I see doing this right now is Bernie Sanders. So it's Bernie Sanders and Tim Walz. I do like that idea for where the passion of the party is coming from and who's leading the passion, and that direction of real transformative change for the party, instead of just saying, well, we have good billionaires, when the richest man in the earth is running the other party.
So I'm here to listen too, because I'm not assuming that it's all Democrats in here, because I was out on a farm last week and it sure the hell wasn't all Democrats. But it was people that were really irritated about the tariffs and the trade war with our neighbors. And there's a responsibility in this time of chaos where elected officials need to hear what people are irritated about. And I would argue that Democratic officials should hear the primal scream that's coming from America is, do something, damn it, this is wrong. This is wrong. And independence. And there's nothing conservative about an unelected South African Nepo baby firing people at the VA. And for our Republican neighbors now, all of a sudden they're like, I wanted my 401k to go down. I wanted this, you know. This idea that you would be okay. Can you imagine if President Barack Obama had brought his unelected African friend to cut? You know what I mean? How they think to cut the government. This is wrong. And your member of Congress is there to be your voice, is there to push back. So we're not here, and I'm not here to criticize and to personally attack Representative Nunn. I congratulate him on his service, unlike the other side who finds a need to criticize everybody and attack and do all that. That's not what we're here for, but you were hired to do a job. And that's the questions that we want to ask. You need to answer the questions about the things you did. Why is it okay for President Musk to do what he's doing? Why is that okay? Why are we fighting a trade war with Canada that Donald Trump negotiated the deals on and now doesn't want it? Why is that? And why do billionaires get to tell us you're going to have to endure a little bit of pain? Well, we wouldn't if you'd pay your taxes. We wouldn't have to. We wouldn't have to. And so I would say to you, Rita and I are going to take questions and hear from you, and I don't think it's going to be that different than I'm hearing from my constituents about trade wars, about Medicare and all that. But this is what your representative needs to be here for. Because if they were proud of what they did, it's very hard to find an elected official who doesn't want to be in front of a crowd or a camera. When they don't want to be, you know something's up. And the something that up is, even people who voted for this didn't vote for what they're getting. They didn't vote for the crap. Because if they did, and like I said it, I know Iowa, we're pretty similar. We share Norman Borlaug. This is like a family reunion when Minnesotans come to Iowa. You know, we talk our smack. You play football better than I wish you did. Those types of things. But there's traditions. And I got to share one with you. I got a chance in 2019 when our Gophers were undefeated for the first time in 100 years, you know, to go to Kinnick Stadium. And I got to stand there, though, after the first quarter and wave and do the wave. So my question to your representative is, why did you vote to cut cancer research for children and then go and wave at the people who were there? Why? Why? So to each of you, we've got work to do. We've got work to do to figure this out. I also believe that empathy, compassion, and decency can win the day. But my wife, who is a 29-year public school teacher and administrator, I always recall her two sayings when she would send our kids off the door to go to school. Good friends and good learners every day. Sometimes they were neither, but sometimes they were both. True, one or the other. But she also said, don't ever mistake our kindness for weakness, because we stand up for those without a voice. So Iowa, thanks for having me. Again, I'm here to bring the megaphone I have to you so you can lift it up and hopefully he can hear what you're talking about.
Okay, so from this point on, he does the town hall. If you guys want to watch it, you can. But I think this is what we need in the Democratic Party right now. I feel that the James Carville approach of rolling over is not something that I second. Right now, it is true that if we did nothing, the nation would probably still lose respect for the Trump administration, still lose respect for the White House, as all of the focus moves upon the White House acting out and, you know, throwing their spoons at the wall and crayons scribbling everywhere and ranting and raving about conquering nations this, conquering nations that, backstabbing allies. I'm sure that support would still drop. But you want to add pressure. If you see a crack, leaving it alone, it will continue to crack. It will continue to get worse, and the foundation will continue to break apart. Probably be worse if you took a sledgehammer to it, though, no? Okay, what do we got next? What do we got next?